A question that I seem to be getting asked more and more often these days when people are sending me stuff to master for them is, how would you like it? And that's kind of a bit of a weird question that I feel is perpetuated by YouTube stuff and people kind of claiming you should do this, you shouldn't do that when you're sending stuff off for master. Now, I want to do a kind of, it serves two purposes, this video. This video will show you why you should and shouldn't do certain things when you're sending stuff off for mastering. And it's also kind of a checklist, I guess, for people when they are sending me stuff for mastering. But I want to go through some kind of do's and don'ts because there's a lot of things that are said to be the thing you should do. And there are reasons why they are true and why they aren't true. Let's just get into it and see what you really should absolutely do, you shouldn't absolutely do, and maybe some things that are some people like this, some people like that. Okay, so first of all, I've got a mix here, and this is a mix that has been mixed and mastered here. And it's all in one session, but I had a kind of a mastering chain on there of what I wanted it to sound like. So let's just take a listen to it just really quickly and just kind of get a feel for it. Okay, so it is a mix. It is a master of sorts. Just want to run you through what I've got going on here because there are some things that I absolutely do not want on when I'm mastering, but there's some things that I kind of can't do it without. So first of all, let's go through the chain. So one thing that I'm always putting in master chains is Virtual Tape Machine from Slate Digital. Love that plugin. Infinity EQ, don't often use this, to be perfectly honest, but this needed a specific thing, some dynamics and some overall lift, so I've done that. This is really the kind of big one though, because I've got Ozone 12 in here. And you'll see, if you just look over here, all the other stuff that's in there is tonal balance control, so that's just metering. Adapter, which is Metric KB, so that's just a referencing thing where I can reference between other mixes and stuff. VSX, we all know what VSX is, great for mixing on headphones and just making everything better, basically. And then finally, we've got Insight. So the first thing to say is that any of those last four, leave on. I don't care. It doesn't matter. They don't actually affect the sound of what's going on. But here's the thing. If I export this and give this to a mastering engineer, for a start, if you look at the integrated loudness of it, it's proper loud. It's like -6 point something is well loud. So if someone's giving me, for example, a mix to master that's already at -6, then that makes things very difficult for me. But here's the thing. I don't want you to completely disregard what you're doing because you may have spent quite a lot of time on this master chain. You may have spent a decent amount of time getting it to sound exactly the way you want it to. And when you take all that stuff off, the mix falls apart. So here is the really big thing. If you've got a master chain on a session and you love the sound of it, give me two versions. Give me one that is completely without any of that stuff, and then give me one with it as well, because I can always use that adapter Metric KB. I can use that as a reference. And this is something that I think mastering engineers are not necessarily known to do, but I think they do more often than you kind of realize, and that is use references. And whether that's a reference of the mix that they've given you, like a different version of it, or just something else. Referencing is so massive. If you say, I want my track to stand up against, I don't know, Green Day, for example, that stuff's loud. So you need to know exactly what you're dealing with. So the first point here really is if you've been mixing into a limiter, into a compressor, into an EQ, give us two versions, because I want to know what it sounds like to you. That sound that you've got through your master chain is obviously important enough to you that you're keeping that chain on. So let's take a listen to it. So really what you want to do here is you can just export two versions, but there's kind of a caveat here. So first of all, I'm going to export this full version with everything on. So I'm going to press Command and B. I'm going to bounce it. And here's the big thing. If it's been recorded at 44.1, then please, please, please export it to me at 44.1. I have had sessions in the past where people will give me 32-bit files that are up at 192, and I'll say to them, wow, that's quite high quality. What was the reason for that? And they'll say something along the lines of, well, I saw on YouTube that I should always give you the best quality version, so I gave you that. And yeah, I get it. I understand that. But really, what the best quality version means is whatever the song was recorded at. So giving me the best quality version of something that was recorded at 24-bit 44.1K is giving me it at 24-bit 44.1K. Don't upsample it or downsample it or anything like that. I don't necessarily need it at 32-bit unless, there are some reasons. But don't give it to me at MP3 because, no, we don't work at MP3, do we? MP3s have their place. MP3s are unbelievably fantastic at I've just got a new version for you to have a listen to. I've got 5 minutes before I've got to leave the studio. I'm just going to shove it on Dropbox and you can have a listen to it. I've got no problem with 320 kbps MP3s for listening to references. I don't care. It's absolutely fine. I'm probably not listening to that pristine top end. I'm listening to, is the vocal loud enough now? Or is there enough reverb on the snare or whatever? So MP3s definitely have their place. But when someone says, I want it at the highest quality possible, that's what they mean. They mean that it's at the session, I don't know how you say it, whatever the session was recorded at, the session numbers, I guess. But this is going to be the loud version. So we can export that and please call it something like my master _ mastered or _ loud, whatever it is. And that just gives me a reference or my master _ reference because I want to hear it. I want to hear what's going on there. And I think you'll find that a lot of mastering engineers are actually interested in that. I think mastering gets thrown around as this dark art where the people who do it are seen as these kind of sorcerers who don't deal with low quality audio. They don't deal with anything that's been limited. Mastering engineers are working professionals. They kind of deal with whatever they get paid to deal with, really. They can strive to get the best quality possible, but ultimately, if you're giving them this copy of something, then that's the one they're mastering, unless they can get something better. And they want to hear what you want it to sound like. So always, I'm going to want to hear the full mastered, in inverted commas, the loud version. But you can do a few different versions. If you really wanted to, you could just bypass all of these. So all of my processing there, I'm going to bypass. It's going to come down in level considerably, but let's just see what's going on there. Let's just press play. And really, we're looking for clipping. Okay, so we peaked there at minus 0.6. Which brings me on to another point. I've taken all my processing off and I want it just completely bare. I want a version to actually master from. So the loud version is my reference. This one with no processing on at all is the one I'm actually going to be working on. You'll see people who say we should deliver masters with 3 dB of headroom at the top. Now, I've done a big video on this where I kind of go on a bit of a rant, which you can check out at the top. But really, to give you the abridged version of this, I don't know why this came about, because anyone who knows anything about digital audio knows that me turning this mix down by 3 dB is just the same as the mastering engineer turning the mix down by 3 dB. Mastering engineers don't have special decibels. It doesn't work like that. It's just digital audio. So I kind of feel like the reason that minus 3 dB thing came in is because you've got true peak limiting. Now, what is true peak limiting? Well, let's take a look at Ozone 12, for example. I'm using true peak limiting here. And some people say that it does colour the sound. Some people say it doesn't colour the sound. I don't know. I always use it and I've never noticed anything sounding bad. That's not for me to say, though. What true peak limiting does is it looks in between the samples, essentially. So it counteracts any intersample peak. So just because you've set your limiter at 0 or minus 0.1, say, that doesn't mean that there's stuff in between that isn't going to go over. And I think that 3 dB is just kind of a safety net, because some of those peaks can get pretty loud. Can they be 3 dB louder than the limit level? Probably not, but it's kind of a bit of a safety net. So really what I'm saying is that you will see people say on YouTube and on forums and stuff, when you're sending your track out to be mastered, you should always, always, always leave 3 dB of headroom. And I'm here to tell you, no, you shouldn't. That is not a thing. That it's digital audio. Me turning it down by 3 dB is the same as you turning it down by 3 dB. It doesn't matter. If you give it to me and it's peaking at -1, then I can just turn it down. It doesn't matter. What we're really worried about is peaks and intersample peaks and anything that is going to be detrimental. If you take a look at a lot of the stats for a load of commercially released stuff, you will see intersample peaks all over the place. The actual true peak level is clipping, loads of it's clipping, and people don't care. It doesn't matter. Technically it's incorrect, but I don't see anyone telling them that those million copies they sold or billion streams they got are worthless because there were intersample peaks. Doesn't work like that. But the one big thing to say here is that it's quite possible that in your mix, if we go to a game matched version, for example, so we've got all this processing still in, and then we're going to bypass this ozone. So this is actually bringing the overall level down so that the bypassed and non-bypassed states are the same loudness. Often the mix can fall apart and it can just sound a bit naff. So here's the thing. I definitely want the cleanest version that I can get. But if you think that when you actually do the mix, that a bit of stereo widening is helping and that a little bit of dynamic control is helping, a little bit of this is helping, a little bit of that is helping, by all means, put it on. Because if I take a listen to it and I don't notice that anything is completely amiss, I'm not going to know. And to me, that's just the way that it sounds. What's the difference between having a stereo imager on every single bus as opposed to having it on the main stereo out? Well, there's a little bit of a difference, but ultimately you don't get told in sending stuff to a mastering engineer you should take everything off the buses, but you get told you should take it off stereo out. And it's a little bit kind of weird. It's a little bit kind of backward. But have a listen to these, just see what the actual difference is. Now, I've got load and load noise here, which is coming, I think, from Virtual Tape Machine. Don't know, load noise somewhere, whatever. Take a listen to these two when they're gain matched and just see what it's actually doing. To my ear, when I take all that processing off on ozone, the snare gets louder, the guitars get quieter, and the whole thing kind of falls apart. I've got absolutely no problem with you putting a little bit of processing on your main bus. If I want it taken off, I'm just going to shoot you an email and say, can you please take that off because I don't like it. It's not a big deal. I certainly feel that this big gap between mix engineers or even artists and mastering engineers, there shouldn't be as big a gap as there is. Mastering engineers are a massive part of the process, and I kind of feel like this demystifying kind of process is really worth looking at and really worth understanding what it is that these terms mean when you say them. You know, what is true peak limiting? Why should I worry about it? What are overs? Why should it be a problem? So my feeling is that if you really want to, send me like 3 versions. Send me a full massive loud version, send me a version that's not got anything on at all, and then send me like a middle of the way one. Chances are I'm probably going to use the middle of the way one, because if that's what it sounded like to you in your head, then that's great. But when you're sending stuff to a mastering engineer, first of all, don't be afraid. Second of all, just talk to them, because you can guarantee that they've probably got some pretty good insight into what stuff's going to sound good and how it's going to work, because they're kind of detached from the process. They weren't in there when you were tracking that guitar solo that took you 400 takes that you're sick of hearing. They're listening to it with fresh ears, so they've got a new perspective. But most of all, just be open to, maybe I'm going to have to bounce off a new version. Maybe I'm going to have to give them something that I wasn't expecting, but that I'm going to know for next time that I work with a mastering engineer. But don't give 3 dB of headroom unless you're asked to. And if you are asked to, ask why you're being asked to. And if the response is something like, so I've got some headroom to work with, just tell them they're talking nonsense, because that isn't a thing. Digital audio is digital audio. Someone turning it down by 3 dB is the same as someone else turning it down by 3 dB. And that's just the way it is. So hopefully that's kind of demystified things a little bit for you. People who send me stuff are often asking, how should I deliver it? Well, that's how you should deliver it. You can give me a massive loud version if you want. That's cool for a reference. Give me one with absolutely nothing, and then give me a halfway point. Give me something where you think, well, I reckon that it actually sounds pretty good with a bit of compression and a bit of EQ. That's cool. I'm going to take it from there. Have you got anything that you think is really crucial when delivering stuff for mastering engineers? Maybe you're a mastering engineer and you want something different. Maybe you're a mix engineer who's been asked for some weird stuff in the past in mastering, not like, you know. Let me know about it. Drop us a comment and I'll see you again soon. Take care.